much more exciting. What's up, everyone? I'm James Patterson, thrilled to dive into another week of LCS alongside Mark Zimmerman and Emily Rand and Lorem. Mark, you feeling the love in the air today? Is that what's going on right there?
Yeah, Emily did it. I was just a follower. I was trying to get in on it, but the delay made me appear very late. I blame that.
Mm-hmm. Now, Mark, they moved you into the box closest to me. I think that's a first. Did you you make someone angry? I think that's an indicator that I have to keep an eye on you today.
This is the penalty box, is when we get put next to you.
Yeah. No funny business,
no.
Mark. No funny business.
Well,
all right, now week
I'll be my best behavior.
Okay, week 2. And Emily, you've been released from the penalty box. That means lots of funny business from you today, okay? Week 2 has 100 Thieves and Cloud9 at 3-0, with lock-in champions Team Liquid sitting next to Evil Geniuses at 2-1, followed by the remaining 6 teams in the league. And important to note that if Cloud9 and 100 Thieves both remain undefeated after their matches today, their matchup tomorrow will become a battle for first and to be the only remaining undefeated team in the league. So eyes on that one. Of course, that brings us to our schedule today. We've got 100 Thieves aiming to maintain their hold of first as they face off against FlyQuest, with Cloud9 doing the same in Game 3 versus Evil Geniuses, followed by 2 more matches before we call it a day. Now, the desk is usually so good at blowing Week 1 results out of proportion, but we thought it would be better this time around to get some takes from professionals in Overreactions. That's you, Reddit. That's all of you Redditors. So I'm going to have you weigh in on 3 different takes that the League of Legends subreddit came up with. And all you have to do is tell me whether or not it's an overreaction and why. So let's head into the first one here. Licorice has looked like FlyQuest's weakest player.
Oh, come on.
This is so to be clear. This is week 1 only. We're forgetting lock-in. I've been mind wiped, right? Someone
Week 1,
the Men in Black
week,
thing.
week 1
Okay.
overreactions.
Overreaction for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, if this had just been for lock-in, I'd be like, okay, I can see that. You looked pretty shaky. There were some communication issues, obviously, with the spot side TPs, but I don't agree with this after week 1, I guess.
I wouldn't agree with it, but I think overall the team looked relatively on the same level. I don't think you could possibly say Jose Dioto.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. No, I still don't think you could say. I still think you could find some other members to point more fingers at than Licorice.
Right.
I'm also on overreaction.
Right, you're not gonna do any of the pointing yourself, but you just want to make it clear that there are other people that you could point at.
I could, in theory. My fingers should go. I could point at anyone, but
all right, but Mr. or Mrs. Redditor out there, that's an overreaction apparently. Alarm.
I think all 5 players on FlyQuest can have, at any given day, it's like one player will be playing really well and the other side won't. So I'm going to say maybe sometimes Licorice looks like the worst player and other times he'll be the best player. It's just a burger flip on whoever is the best player on FlyQuest that day.
Maybe
Except
sometimes.
Jose Dioto, yeah.
Maybe sometimes.
That's what I was going to say is I could see a world where someone thought this, and it wasn't that crazy, but yeah, no, I still can't get behind it.
Yeah, it's not this world, though. We know that much. All right, overreaction number 2. I want to get Emily's take on this one. TSM's standing is directly related to Bjergsen's coaching. Wow, that feels very targeted.
Ooh, okay. I disagree with this, but I think Bjergsen's been put in a really rough position from the get-go. I think that there are a lot of things that we don't know about coaching, which is why I actually did not vote for coach of the split ever when I was a media person, because I think there's just so much going on behind the scenes. When you look at TSM's drafting, I'm assuming that this is what they're kind of blaming Bjergsen for, but from most perspectives that I've heard, a draft is a team thing, right? So I don't even necessarily think you can really blame that onto him. TSM don't look great. And I'm not going to say that they're particularly playing well. I don't think any of the players look like they're particularly on the same page. And, there have been some interesting things that have gone on in their drafts. But do I sit there and point all of the fingers at Bjergsen? No. And do I think their struggles are directly related to him as a coach? Also not necessarily. Again, how much is he trying to help facilitate them coming together as a team? I actually heard in the past that was one of his focuses for last year, talking to him directly in terms of getting the team to do activities together and stuff. So hopefully he's doing that with this team because from my perspective, the biggest problem with TSM is that none of them look like they're communicating with each other in game from the way they move on the map.
And Mark, a former coach, what's your take?
Well, okay, let's not put my former coach hat on here, okay? I'm putting on my
I like that.
my Redditor hat right now, where I'm going to be
Mark
somewhat
just likes to
illogical.
forget about the coaching
Former
part of his career.
I was a Redditor before I was a coach, okay?
True.
So one angle I can take this take in that I can somewhat get behind is that from here, TSM standing is directly related to Bjergsen's coaching because they are struggling. Like Emily is saying, it does seem like there's communication issues and they're not all on the same page or they're not seeing the game the same way. And I don't think you can blame a coach when, early on in a year with a team of 5 players all over the world coming together to play, that it doesn't, hit the ground running. But it's his job to make it start working. And so in that sense, in the future, if this team hovers around, 8th place, which I think they're around right now, 1-2, then yeah, I think a little bit sure.
All right. Yeah. You cannot blame the coach. I like where this is heading. We've landed on kind of the idea that you cannot blame the coach for the given circumstances, the condition of the team at which point he's taken over. But at a certain point, there has to be some ownership for the growth of the team, given the fact that you're the person at the helm. All right, let's head to our final overreaction here. Spika has received too much hype for how he's been playing. I'm curious your take, Lauren, because I know that you had some praise for him for his play so far this year.
I disagree because how could Spika be getting too much hype when originally he was being ridiculed for, man, it's TSM just putting in all these junglers. You got Spika, you got Grig or Armeo now, and you got Acadian. You've got all 3 of them. They're flip-flopping back and forth between all of them. He wasn't doing great. And then out of nowhere, or, over time, he had massive growth through Worlds and throughout the entire split. So if you're going to praise him, when should it be? It should be now when he's doing better and better and remaining consistent and by far the most consistent part of TSM. I don't think you can really fault him for being the most consistent because he's the one that's been on TSM the longest, but he's young and he's just been playing really well. So I think he deserves all the praise, and I think someone as young as him needs that kind of morale boost to keep going too.
I have a follow-up to this in that it's really difficult to be a good jungler on a bad team because jungle is so intrinsically tied to everything that's going on. I actually don't think Spika has been playing super well, but like I said previously, I don't think anyone on TSM has been playing particularly well. And I also think when Spika does have a good play, or when, Sword Art has a good engage, or when someone makes a good play, the main issue that I see from TSM is that they're not following up as well as they should to actually make that play happen. Like, it really just seems like the communication on this team is not there yet. And maybe they'll get there eventually. I know, like PoE said in his post-match interview, he's like, we're all good players. That's not the problem, right? And I don't think it's a problem with Spika as much as it is obviously a team thing. I know people can point out to TSM's jungle history too, and I guess the jury's still out on whether that is going to continue. But for Spika specifically, I think it's tough to evaluate his play when the team so obviously has massive communication issues.
So a proper amount of praise for Spika as of just yet. Thank you to those 3 Redditors, whoever you may be, for all of your ridiculous takes. Keep them coming. With the first week of the LCS Fantasy split behind us, or week behind us, rather, we here at the Analyst Desk have an important PSA that we would like to pass along for all of you. Save yourself some headaches, ban Udyr this week, and lay off of Graves, maybe.
Yeah, Graves was really high for how much he was played, and while it's pretty easy to understand that coming out of lock-in where he was played a bit more, going into LCS, banning Graves probably didn't block a lot of points. Seeing Kai'Sa there makes sense. Seeing Orianna there makes sense. Seeing Renekton there makes sense, although Renekton might drop off. And then, not seeing Udyr here, who was arguably one of the stronger, or at least most picked. Again, we're not necessarily looking at win rate for fantasy. We're just looking at whether the champion was picked and whether you can get points on it. So, I think the thing that stands out to me here is definitely the Graves.
Mark?
Yeah, and I think it's super important to actually take some time and look at, now that we're on a patch week, there's going to be a new patch coming. We'll have a segment to talk about all those changes, but definitely pay attention because in our fantasy week, league this week. Kobe knocked 50 points off of Freak's team just through bans, and it's absolutely insane how hard you can trounce someone if they're a little bit behind on what the new meta is, and you're able to know, like, oh, this is what everyone's going to be playing this week.
Yeah, it just so happened that the majority of our matchups by base score were still determined in our league this week. But as you mentioned, Mark, you can see the possibility of a series swinging by virtue of the picks and bans. So it really highlights the importance, of your picks in that sense. Let's take a look at top performers, though, because it isn't just the pick and ban that's going to win it for you. You got to put up that base amount of points to begin with. And so here are our overall top player points for fantasy in week 1. Blabber way ahead of the pack, over 20 points more than the next, which was Jizuke. Then you followed up with Sven, the other Sven, and RJS being the guy who sneaks into the top 5 that might surprise many.
Yeah, and it's worth noting that there's a number of teams in the leagues that people are playing in. Currently, only 5% of all leagues are actually 10-team leagues, which means there's probably some free agents floating around that you can try and snap up. And if you're looking at people like RJS and being like, what the hell? Then think about how long their games are and how many points that they actually have time to accumulate. I had CLG's bot lane. They did great for me. And so if you're looking at some of these teams, players that might not jump out to you initially, not surprised to see Lost C9 members here. But for some of the teams that are playing longer games like CLG, they could actually be a pretty good pickup.
I like you calling out the CLG bot lane, because if we flip on over to the list of top managers and users out there playing fantasy right now, we're going to take a look at the top 10 leaderboard. You will actually see that the person occupying the top spot clean has Smoothie in his support position. Notably different than the other 9, but that, to your point again, Mark, is a result of CLG's long back and forth games that are kill heavy. And so you will generate more points the longer a game goes on, something to consider.
Blabber and Jizuke look like pretty good pickups.
Yeah, that's a good point too, right? look for those consistencies across the top 10, and it is that jungle and mid lane position that really are racking it up for people. But again, I want to highlight Mark's statistical call out that only 5% of operating leagues right now out there in fantasy are full 10-team leagues like the one that we are in here on the broadcast team, which means, yes, for us, there isn't a ton of movement that can be made with free agency, but for the other 95% of you out there, there are people sitting on those benches right now that you could possibly pick up who could be big movers in the weeks to come. And now, whether you drafted him for your fantasy team or not, it is no exaggeration to say that C9's Blabber was the top performer after week 1. So Riv sat down with the MasterCard Player of the Week ahead of this week's matches. Let's take a look.
Thank you very much, Dash. It is time for MasterCard Player of the Week, and I am joined by Cloud9's Blabber as he racks up another Best Player of the Week now for the first time here in spring 2021. Blabber, always great to talk to you. How you feeling, and how do you feel about your play in week 1?
Yeah, thanks. I think I played pretty well week 1. I'm feeling pretty good about myself, about my team, and I really think that this year will be different than last year. Obviously, it's too early to tell, but I'm hoping we can keep up our momentum from week 1.
Kind of in what capacity would you say it's going to be different? In kind of a hopeful way, or you just know the team's in a different position?
I just feel like this year, I feel more hopeful about our team, I guess, not falling off towards the end of the year. I think that we will be very good in any meta. I think all our players have extremely large champion pools, and I think right now we are learning a lot from our coaching staff and from playing with each other. And to me, it feels like we are improving quite fast, or maybe not quite fast, but we are definitely improving. And I can definitely see it. So it feels really good to me.
That's awesome. And obviously the roster changes this year with Fudge and Perks. Has your role or play style changed in any capacity on the team with those introductions?
I definitely wouldn't say like my playstyle has changed very much. I think I'm still playing very greedy as I normally do. And my teammates play around that. And I'm really glad that they're able to support me. I do think obviously with 2 new members, right, me and Perks have our synergy to work on. That's something we'll be working out throughout the year, obviously. And with Fudge coming in, he's a very good weak side player, but he also knows how to play his carry matchup. So it's very nice playing with both of them.
That's awesome to hear the changes are working out and you guys are able to build on it so quickly. Final question for you. I had to get your thoughts on every opponent having TP Ignite in the top lane against you in week 1. What were you thinking?
Well, I think TP Ignite is good in some cases. I think it had a really bad showing versus us in 3 games. I think I punished it very well, along with Fudge, and Luca came up there and helped me as well. But I think it's very odd that they will take TP Ignite and then they won't play around that, like as a team. Or, for example, when I killed Niles, he doesn't even ward level 1 when he takes Ignite, and they don't really play their lanes any differently. So they just make it very easy for me to kill them.
Well, we saw Cloud9 take full advantage of that all week 1 long. Best of luck in the rest of the season, Blabber. It's always a pleasure chatting with you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
All right, everybody, we're stepping away for a quick moment, but don't go anywhere. More Countdown after this.
Welcome back to the LCS Countdown. Now, for Week 2, the LCS has switched to patch 11.3, which saw targeted nerfs to a lot of high-priority jungle champions. Mark, let's start there.
Oh, yeah. Olaf got hit with a nerf bat. Udyr, Taliyah, Pantheon, all of them took a turn on the nerf bat, but some of them got hit harder than the others. I think in particular, Udyr's was pretty negligible. It was 5 damage per level off his aura of Phoenix Dance, which really is not impactful for your clear speed compared to the cone and stuff. So overall, I think Udyr's going to be totally fine. And when you look at the nerfs that some of the other champions took for their clear speed and stuff like that, they're going to get hurt a lot more. So of all the priority champions to get hit, he's probably the least affected and will stay firmly on top at least until the big jungle patch coming next rotation.
And I'm curious to see where Pantheon ends up, because I think this is a direct nerf to his clear speed. It was very targeted at, they said, jungle and mid. And by targeting how quickly he kills minions and monsters, obviously that's going to affect his jungle clear. And right now you kind of do have to keep up with the clear speed of other popular junglers right now. So, with where his value comes from being a flex pick and also from the global, I still think that the global part is still really important. I think he's still an excellent support pick. But in terms of jungling, I'm really curious to see where he ends up on this latest patch.
Very interesting to me that, 4 very prolific junglers can get hit, and yet, as Mark said, we expect one of those 4 to maybe even rise in popularity and priority as a result. But it's not just champions, Lauren. We also saw a couple of big-ticket items get hit as well. Most notably, we've got Gore Drinker and Sterix taking nerfs.
Right, so this has a pretty big implication on Olaf jungle, not just with the nerf to attack speed, but his team fight will be worse because of the Sterix and the Gore Drinker nerf, especially his survivability. But I predict that we will still see a lot of Olaf just because his clear is so good, his dueling power is still very good, and with champions like Lulu and Seraphine, he'll just be a monster in the team fight. But aside from jungle, we have top lane, and these affect 2 champions in specific, at least mostly, is Renekton and Aatrox. And I want to talk specifically about Renekton because he's been a really high priority pick, and we can see sometimes in these team fights he'll be getting very low, but an empowered Q and a Gore Drinker proc will send him from 38% HP all the way back to 80% HP or higher. And so while I do think we will see less Renekton, he'll still be a pretty good pick because aside from the items being good on him, he's just a very good pick when you combine him with junglers like Taliyah or Lilia or anything that can dive top lane with mixed damage, because Renekton has such high priority in that lane that it's really the champion itself that is strong right now, and the items made him a little overboard before, but he'll still be in a pretty good spot.
Light touches there, still expectations of play for the champions that would pick up those items specifically. I have a personal curiosity, and I want to come back to you, Alorum, as the top lane main here, rather, on Sylas. We saw Sylas with 1 game played already last week. It was Impact who picked it up. But Sylas, a couple of buffs to both the Q and the W. Do you expect this to open up more opportunities for play for Sylas, or going to relatively stay the same?
These are kind of small buffs, and Sylas is a flex pick, so if a flex pick gets a little bit better and people start to play him in both lanes, then he's just going to be really good for the draft. But overall, like with this mana buff, a little bit of damage on W, I don't think he's going to be a priority pick just yet, because he's really mainly a counter pick. When you pick Sylas, you want to make sure that you're picking it into a team that has a lot of good ults to steal, or your lane is going to be really easy. For example, when you're playing top lane, you'll usually see Sylas's against Ornns, Malphites, and even Gnar, just because the Gnar ult is so good on Sylas. So you're probably still going to only see it as a counterpick option.
Niche, but stronger when it is picked, at the very least. Last, certainly not least, let's talk Seraphine. Emily, this is a champion that, in fact, we expected to see more of in Week 1 than we actually did, largely because of its presence elsewhere in the world.
Yeah, so Seraphine was really high priority in other leagues. Here we're going to see it in mid lane for a few teams over in the LCK. However, even though it was really prevalent in NA Academy and pretty much, permanently banned or picked, we didn't see it as much in LCS. She was banned fairly frequently, but she still fell through pick ban a few times. Even though Academy, she was still, I believe, 100% banned. And we just saw her in LEC this afternoon with Niski still playing her mid. It worked out super well in that composition. I actually really liked how they played that with a higher AP damage Lilia, because he went Moonstaff, Seraphine mid. And then there was the Lilia and a top lane Riven, and it was a really fun game from Fnatic. LCS didn't play Seraphine that much, so I don't know how much this will impact LCS. However, we're still seeing her in other leagues, and she's still been permanently banned in Academy. So
it's good to hear that Niski hasn't lost his style, even in making the trek back to the LEC. Sounds like the perfect champion for him.
It was a fun composition. I had a lot of fun watching that game.
Okay, well then we'll look for maybe something similar here today in the LCS. Let's transition our conversation to the first game of the day, where we have 100 Thieves taking to the Rift opposite FlyQuest, who have shown noticeable improvement from the lock-in tournament.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing for me is that their bot lane looked a lot more proactive. And even when they made mistakes, they were moving around the map. They were doing things for themselves. I think you see there the deaths in their lock-in performance compared to the deaths in Week 1. Obviously, that also helps if they're dying less. But, they're dying less and they're doing more things, which I really liked to see, because I feel like coming out of the lock-in, everyone was looking at this bot lane being like, I don't know how well they're going to stack up. They look like kind of a weak point. And I was really happy to see them being a lot more proactive and, dying less.
I mean, dying less in more games while doing more things sounds like a win-win-win to me. So, all signs point up and to the right. Let's keep going there, FlyQuest. But that all said, Mark, it still feels like anytime we talk about FlyQuest and generating wins, that it has to come from Jose Dioto and Licorice, of all people.
Yeah, I think while it's great to see the bot side improvements, I think that's going to help them find a lot of wins, but they're usually coming off the back of Jose Dioto and Licorice in the top side of the map. And Jose Dioto in particular, going to have a tough matchup here against Closer. Closer's stats aren't that insane, considering he did have a bit of a tough week last week where 100 Thieves were making some mistakes. But he did also flame Horizon another jungler in Dardoch, and Closer is so good about, usually finding his leads, finding ways to affect lanes while still usually keeping up his farm. Jose Dioto has been a little bit more farm-oriented, and so I think a lot of this game is about how well FlyQuest laners are going to stack up to this kind of really aggressive early game dive that we've seen out of 100 Thieves so far, and, if Jose Dioto can reach his big item power spikes without his team being fallen behind.
Well, Lauren, let's zero in on that top lane matchup. Licorice, Someday. Can Licorice do more for FlyQuest than Someday can do for 100 Thieves?
So we saw last week in an interview with Licorice that he was talking about how in his entire career he had been slotted into teams that were already really good. So it's not like he had to step up and just be the primary carry for his team. And it's the opposite for Someday, where he found himself on kind of mediocre or just okay teams. And a lot of the times, if Someday had to win, he had to be this enormous threat. And now I feel like the roles are just kind of flip-flopped, where Licorice is this veteran of FlyQuest, and he needs to fulfill the old role that Someday had to do, and Someday fulfills the old role of Licorice. So it's going to be interesting to see if Licorice can do that Someday performance on FlyQuest, and see if Someday just sits back and lets 100 Thieves do their job, or if he's going to kind of match that aggression.
I think what's really interesting is looking at the solo kills versus solo or isolated deaths per game, and Licorice was basically double in both of those categories over Someday, and it speaks to the fact that that pressure that he feels to make plays happen. You kind of put yourself out there, you might get that kill, but you also might end up dying, and I think that's why you do see more solo deaths out of him right now for Licorice. But it's not like 100 Thieves have been perfectly clean either. They did int a lot of dives last week. They had to make a lot of comeback victories to get their good record. So there's still that concern for 100 Thieves that they need to clean it up a little bit.
Right, perfect record. They didn't get their perfect lead, though, to say the least. But again, either way, it's made for some very exciting games, and why the top lane might be very interesting to watch in this first game of the day today. Let's get an update on the B Quest, doing some good for the environment while also taking names out there on the Rift. You can see here the update for the week. This includes Academy as well as their LCS performances. So already, because of their Academy performances this week, they've added $197 onto the total, bringing it to just over $1,300 so far raised for the B Conservancy. Love to see good being done out on the Rift. Again, it's kills, it's Ocean Drakes, and it's victories for FlyQuest. If you like the world we live in, you're rooting for those three things. All right, prediction time. Let's see if the three of you think FlyQuest has what it takes to take down 100 Thieves and hand them the first loss. No, you did not. Simple as that. But I do see one distinct difference coming in the third game of the day. Emily. Okay, actually, this is surprising because Emily's the oddball in game 3, but I would have expected C9 to be very clearly favorites in that game. So, I mean, Emily, would you not agree? I assume that's why you went for Cloud9.
Yeah, I mean, I think C9 have been looking really good. Obviously, I think EG will be able to deal with their top side. I don't expect Impact to take TP, Ignite. So that's another thing that we can point out about that matchup. But yeah, I really like the way C9 have been playing. So I'm actually kind of surprised that that's where we differed.
Yeah, Lauren, Mark, what's why the inkling that EG is going to come out on top in that one?
I flipped my coins. Jizuke came up heads up. I'm feeling great about it. Like Emily said already, the free top lane ints aren't going to go their way. And Jizuke has actually been good. He's not been a coin flip player this year, so I actually do think it's pretty close.
All right.
I'm almost the exact, or I am the exact same. I think C9 has gotten a lot of free kills off these Ignite TP Camille's where they just go up there level 2, free frag, and then just continue on with their day and snowball the game. But EG, they're not 5 bums, right? They can play the game just fine. And so I think they're pretty consistent too from among the top teams, while C9 has seemed a little less consistent. They've had really good and really bad moments, while EG, I feel, is just kind of like a straight arrow in that they can just play the game they want. If they don't feed, then I'd give it to EG.
All right, okay. If nothing else, I hope what Mark says is true. We get no Ignite TP top lane and at least CC9 challenged in that fashion. That, of course, is the third game of the day. We're going to kick things off with the first, though. So handing it over to Captain Flowers and Azale to get us into game 1.